on what of other questions with regards to nationwide or statewide issues. But for the purposes of this presentation, we are going to be taking a look at what happened in 2020 here in Chesterfield. So what did happen in 2020? Now this is kind of a large overview, not just what happened here in Chesterfield, but what happened around the state and around the country. We had allegations of widespread voter fraud. We had concerns over the validity of the results. There were concerns surrounding security of election equipment and data transmissions. There were concerns and allegations regarding a lack of transparency and public access. There was certainly poor communication by election officials regarding election processes, and there was quite a bit of misinformation and misreporting of events and election protocols by the media. So what happened in Chesterfield Township? Well, here's a couple of the verifiable data points that are important to note. This is available on the county clerk's website for all municipalities. I just pulled Chesterfield Township for you. 100% of the votes that were cast were tabulated. The first report out of the ED means election day. That means from the precincts. The first result came in at 8:21 p.m. that evening. Because in 2020, we had automatic transmission directly from the machine by secure data link to the county clerk's office, which is why the election results were available so quickly. So as soon as that machine was shut down and all of the reports were run and it was confirmed that it balanced, then it was then transmitted to the county. That happened at 8:21 p.m. The first report out of the absentee counting room, or the AV, was at 11:39 p.m. on that evening. By 8:43 p.m., 50% of election day precincts had reported, and by 4:08 in the morning, 50% of the absentees were reported. The absentee counting room always takes longer, especially now that we have no reason absentee voting. We have more than an average of our ballots cast by absentee ballot. Now we have nearly more than 50% usually, and in primaries we can have up to 70% of all ballots cast are cast by absentee voters. Yes, so because of that, the absentee counting room is always the last one to come in because they report in boards all at one time. So that's all 19 precincts. Here in Chesterfield, we have 19 precincts, and we have 19 absentee ballot precincts that are split into multiple absentee counting boards. And I think you learned a little bit about absentee counting boards and the ballot process and how that happens. So the final election day results, the last precinct came in at 9:23 p.m. and our final absentees were reported at 4:08 a.m. So by 4:08 a.m., all of the votes in Chesterfield Township, 100% had been reported. Chesterfield Township had 75.9% voter turnout. That is historically one of the best voter turnouts. The only other election that came close was 2008 presidential election. Was there fraud in Chesterfield Township in 2020? It's a great question, and there's been some allegations that there was fraud here. There were independent investigations as well as cooperative investigations with the Michigan State Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and our office. We take all allegations very seriously, and we check out each and every complaint. We did that, and this is a statement made by the Michigan State Police in their police report, and that is multiple interviews were conducted with no findings of election fraud. So that report is available for public consumption. You can FOIA that information, that report. It's a 54-page report that will go into all of the details. That's available through the Michigan State Police FOIA process. Chesterfield Township did report one instance of fraud day in 2020, and that involved a suspected double voter or a voter impersonation issue. All relevant information was forwarded to the Macomb County prosecutor and the Michigan Secretary of State per election law. So the situation that occurred, we were alerted by one of our election inspectors in the precinct that she believed that the individual who had come in to vote had several hours later to cast a ballot with a different identification. And so we were alerted to that, and then we reported that, but that was the only instance that we had fraud. We forwarded the appropriate authority action after that. Not advised that action came from that, however. We do take action very seriously, and there was actually an article as well that came out ago gave you some additional information. We found, if you'll read the plea as well, that what we found is that of several affidavits that were supplied to us that were concerning potential election fraud, what we found is that voters were mostly misinformed. They didn't realize that when they came into our office to vote prior to Election Day that they were in fact voting absentee. They thought because they had physically come in person that that was voting in person. They thought we had early voting in Michigan. We do not. So it was just a matter of not understanding the process and also not understanding how it's reported and recorded in the qualified voter file. So it was just a matter of basically confusion. So one of the questions that people bring up is, why do election results change after election night? They get suspect when in final results compared to the unofficial results that come in on election night. And what's very important to note is that the unofficial results are in fact that they are unofficial. There are a number of things and processes that election results will go through before we get to a final number. Media outlets are very to be quick and first to report election results. However, they use predictive modeling, they use sampling, they use a number of methods to actually make those calls. They aren't the actual results. A lot of folks don't realize that. They think that they get the results. They do get the unofficial results when they're published by the various election administrators or officials, but they also, they don't get that for every single municipality in a particular state when they want to call the state. They use predictive modeling and a couple of other methods for making that call. So they aren't, it's not to be taken as gospel for sure. They are not local or state official results. Results are unofficial until all votes have been tallied and reviewed and the election has been formally certified. Voters have an opportunity to correct issues after Election Day if they were required, if they issued a provisional ballot. They have a certain number of days after the election to cure that so that that ballot may be counted, so that could change your results. There are also instances where particular ballots that were counted are if it's found they shouldn't have been. Those are in single digits, significant statistics, but they will on a scale, or they change the results, and they certainly will change the actual numeric results. Once all ballots are received and the deadline for fixing any ballot issues is passed, then the results of the election can be certified. The Board of Canvass for actually two certifications. One is the Board of Canvass, and then it also the Board of Canvass. So what essentially happens on Election Day is when the results are tabulated, those tabulated results are then conveyed to the county, whether it's through secure digital transmission, whether it's by physically taking the data and driving that protocols to the county clerk's office. However, prior to it even going to the county clerk's office, it goes through the receiving board. Those are members who are appointed by the election commission in each jurisdiction. In Chesterfield Township, because we are a charter township, our election commission consists of the clerk and two appointed trustees. In Chesterfield Township, be myself. Currently, that is Trustee Hank Anderson and Trustee Kathy Vosberg. The election commission, we are the ones who actually appoint our meetings, and our agendas are available. We are the ones who will appoint those election inspectors as well as the receiving board. So we have two receiving boards here in Chesterfield. Results or materials come in from the, they will go to the receiving board, make sure that the seals are in place, that they match what is written in the paper poll books, and they will make sure that all of the materials from the precinct are consistent with the materials they have in front of them when it comes to the clerk's office to ensure that nothing happened between transport from the precinct to our office. The receiver confirms all of that is acceptable, everything was done and proper, it then is forwarded to the official clerk to me, and that information is forwarded to the county clerk to be published for the public. Yes? Yeah. It's a 7-day process. It's 7. Yeah. Unless state law changes 5 or 8, but right now it's 7. As part of the canvass, the post-election results, the total number of voters in an election is compared to the total number of ballots cast. Now it says that some states may conduct tabulation audits. We conduct audits here in Michigan, and we conduct what is called, and we don't do it, in fact the Secretary of State orders it, it's called a risk limiting audit, is the type of audit that she does. But it verifies that the totals in a given jurisdiction or contest are correct and they are consistent during the canvassing period. Some races or contests may also be recounted at some point. That's the other thing that can certainly change the result. The candidate asked for a machine or a hand recount. It can be weeks, depending on how many precincts they've asked to be recounted. It could be weeks until those official results are done because the results of the recount have to be considered. Once the canvass, any audits, and any recounts have been completed, now we have certified election results, and they are, in fact, go from unofficial to official results. Why does it take to count? A lot of people are confused about why does it take so long. A number of reasons it takes so long to count ballots. It's because there are different rules across the country and across jurisdictions. So here in Chesterfield, and well in Michigan, we do not begin counting absentee ballots until Election Day. We may be allowed in certain instances, for example, 2 years ago, we were allowed to unseal the envelopes, but we could not remove the ballot or the secrecy sleeve inside. It simply saved us the time of opening the ballots because we had. However, they get counted until election. They are kept here under secure lock and key until that time. Also, our absentee ballots must be checked in the clerk's office before being sent to the absentee counting room for processing and final tabulation. So there is quite a process that our absentee ballots go through before they even make it to the counting room to be processed and then finally tabulated. So it takes a bit of time, depending on the state and the jurisdiction, in terms of how long it takes us to count ballots. Just some people what my opinion on getting rid of the tabulation machines and hand recounting everything or hand counting everything. The reality is that for that to practically take place, in fact, the reason that machines were brought into Michigan in the first place is because of concerns over hand counting. You have a considerable amount of human error as well as the more opportunity for fraud and manipulation when you have humans involved. So that's why machines were brought into it. Anything that the machine has, any methods for tabulation, all of that with a hand recount should someone feel that those results were not accurate. So there's always, again, please remember there is always a paper trail and there are always materials available for inspection for nearly 2 years after an election. And candidates are availed the opportunity to have those ballots recounted within a period of time should they feel that there's an error. By the way, if we did happen to do hand recounting of ballots, and we actually have done exercises, and it was brought up to me tonight that perhaps we should do a public exercise of how long it takes to hand count ballots. And it's interesting because I have personal experience with this. First year as clerk in 2012, when I was first elected here, my very first election as a clerk, the election was we did our hand recount. The clerk who I defeated at asked for a recount, and it took a team of 8 people to recount just under 20,000 ballots. It took them 8 hours to do so. You have representatives from Republican and Democratic parties present. You have to have observers present. And once you count the precinct once, you may have to in fact count it 2 or 3 times to make sure that it's accurate so you don't take your first result. If there's a disagreement that there were more or less ballots counted, then they'll start again. So the process itself, if we were to go to strictly a hand tally, we are increasing human error, we're increasing opportunity for people to manipulate ballots, but we are also talking about a process for millions of ballots. Count them more than once to make sure that it's right, or if there's any challenges to that, we may know the result of an election 6 months later. In the meantime, how do we govern? So it's become a practical impossibility for us to do that. But the good news is that while the machines do the early part of the process for us, if someone ever doubts those results, a hand recount is always a viable option to verify those. So the question is, if 2 people on the ballot are contesting the results, can you, once they can request their own hand recounts? We may have to do it more than once if multiple candidates are challenging results, correct? Because they may ask for different precincts. Yes, and they are allowed, and they each have to pay the fee, so they each receive their own. Now, if they agree to do a joint recount, that would be something that they would have an option for, but they're both entitled to their own recount. That would be a question for the Secretary of State. Can they pay the fee? Were any of the 2020 election done? I think there's also some misinformation or misunderstanding about election audits. Yes, Michigan election law requires the Secretary of State to audit the elections. In fact, we also have a county audit, and I will tell you that here in Chesterfield, I do my own audit after every election. That is not required because the county will do selected audits, and the Secretary of State as well will do her audit in addition to that. But this is the Michigan election law that actually states that the Secretary of State shall prescribe the procedures for the election audits, and that each county clerk who conducts an election audit under that section shall provide the results of the election audit to the Secretary of State within 20 days after the election audit's complete. So, though the Secretary of State often will say she's done over 250 audits, that's true. She's required by law to audit the election, every election that she conducts. However, again, I like to say the devil is in the details because it's in fact the Secretary of State who dictates how the audits are conducted. So were audits done? Yes, they were. How they were done, again, was under the direction of the Secretary of State. Yes?
So every time a new Secretary of State gets elected, can they change the law, can they change the rules?
They can't change the law, but they can change how they do the audits. Again, I like to say that even election administrators like myself and other local clerks who have the authority to conduct elections or to enforce election law, the Secretary of State's function is to enforce election law, we have to do those functions, but how they are done is left to the discretion of each election administrator. They can choose to follow best practices and protocols or not. So, questions and answers. I like to leave quite a bit of time at the end of this section for questions because I know people have a lot of specific questions, although we've answered, I think, a few of them in the course of this presentation. But are there any other questions regarding the 2020 election and what did or did not happen? Wow, no questions. We did a very good job, I guess, very thorough of explaining what occurred in 2020. What's important is that we, as election administrators, must be forthcoming and transparent with how we process elections and answer any questions that the public may have. I think a lot of the problem comes in when election administrators are less than forthcoming or obstruct transparency for the public, and that's where it comes into play. But please know that the public does have access to all of those election materials for 22 months. Now, given that right now, all election materials from 2020 are scheduled for destruction 22 months following the final canvass. So that was actually in December. So in October, we will be destroying, and myself, along with all the other clerks throughout the state, will be processing those for destruction as required. So that's a good question. The question is shredding or burning, and it's actually a good question because certain election records must be burned. In fact, state law demands or mandates that voter master cards must, in fact, be destroyed by burning. Now, with recent technology, which is pulverization, which is how we do it now, that wasn't available then, so perhaps they'll change the law and be convinced that pulverizing is just as good as burning. But right now, all of our election records are destroyed by pulverization method. And we do receive a certification of destruction as well.
And out of curiosity, where does that occur?
So that occurs right here at the township offices. In fact, it won't be this coming month, but on August 25th, we will be destroying our records that are eligible for destruction, and we are making that available to the public as well. So if you have some secured or sensitive documents that you would like destroyed and you are a resident here in the township, you can bring those with you, and they're free of charge, and those are they can be processed. August 25th. So. I'm sorry, do we have a party when we destroy the documents? We get our certification and we all breathe a sigh of relief. Are there any other questions? Yes.
How is it though, in 2020, it took such a long time for them to keep recounting and keep auditing and all this, which just made for more suspicion.
Sure.
How come 10 years before this, or 20, they could pretty much say, this person became the president?
Right.
What happened?
So the question is, why does it seem to take so much longer now than it used to finalize results? And I will tell you that, historically speaking, we have far more litigation now than we ever have had. People tie things up in court. So therefore, certain processes get stalled. That delays results. We also have more absentee ballots now than we've ever had. And the problem is, with absentee ballots, they're all done at one time in one place. Whereas in your precincts, you have the same, if not lesser ballots spread out among many, many locations that's being done at, and many more people. So the way that election law is structured right now, allowing for litigation, as well as having more absentee ballots and the various processes and protocols that have to and should be followed, that all takes time. So a lot changed after 2018. The citizen referendums or citizen initiatives and proposals that passed in 2018 also build in additional time requirements. So, yes?
If you don't want to answer this, I'll understand.
Okay.
If you want to answer, what is your opinion as to what is the greatest threat or reason of fraud nationally? Because it is happening, there's always some fraud happening, of course, the amount is unknown. So what in your opinion is that, if you want to say? If not, I get it.
So the question is, I have no problem answering the question. The question is, what's my opinion of the greatest threat as far as voter fraud and nationwide? And why do we see it so prevalently? I've actually done some academic study on this, and I will tell you we actually have less fraud now than we ever had. Many of us in school might remember studying Tammany Hall, which talks about corruption in government and elections and so forth back in the 1800s, turn of the century. That's been going on for a long time. The reality is that we actually, because of technology, although it can be corrupted certainly, we certainly have more fail-safes in place now. But my concern nationwide is the fact that we do not have any nationwide standards or requirements for photo ID, identifying, yes, voter identification, and verifying and confirming that the person casting the ballot is in fact the person entitled to cast that ballot. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Just make sure you are who you say you are, and I've struggled with why folks would have an aversion to that. I mean, certainly we all want to make sure that no one is pretending to be us and disenfranchising us from our vote, because if we're not verifying the identity of a voter, we're disenfranchising someone else who has been impersonated, because they won't be able to cast a ballot. So we want to make sure that each person is entitled. I'd love to see 100% voter participation. That would be wonderful. The reality is we're not going to have that, but for those who do participate, we need to put more safeguards in place to make sure that we are securing their identity. Any other questions?
If you have a voter that says that they voted,
Mm-hmm.
and then they show up or somebody else voted for them,
Mm-hmm. So the question is, what do you do when you have someone who shows up to vote and our records indicate that a ballot's already been cast for them? Each and every one of those, they don't happen very often. More times than not, it's a clerical error or it's an error inside the system. For example, we have a junior and a senior that live in the same household, and when the senior came to vote, someone went to check the voter record and they clicked on the junior instead. Same name, same address, but it was just an error in selecting the voter, and so then we can see that that occurred. Or it's a case, especially with absentee ballots, what we will see is we will see that the wife put the husband's ballot in her envelope and he put, their ballots got switched inside the envelopes. We often see that. That's the most common. We also forgot that they voted absentee. They forgot they cast a ballot, and then now they come into the precinct location to vote on election day, and we have to inform them they've already cast a ballot. In that case, in most of those cases, we can actually resolve those issues inside the precinct or at the AV counting room. However, in some cases, they need to come here to the clerk's office and we will pull all the original records. So if it says they voted absentee and they don't think they did, we're gonna pull their absentee ballot application with their signature on it. We're gonna pull their absentee ballot envelope, and we're gonna pull their MasterCard. And we are going to show them that material and ask if that is in fact their signature and if they recall voting. And we've had that happen twice in the 10 years that I've been here. And each time I completely forgot, I didn't realize I did that. So we will pull all the original source documents, because there's always a paper trail, always. So the question is, do we use social security numbers for identification? And the answer is no, we do not. We do use voter identification numbers and signatures, however. And yeah. Sure, it's a unique numeric identifier. And some people have a lot of concerns about that information being in the system. The system to be secure to begin with. They don't want to put their social security numbers in there. That's a concern. However, there is an initiative, a citizen initiative, that does actually propose that very thing, and that is to use the last 4 digits of a social security number for identification purposes. I think what we need to do is we need to give voters more options and choices to secure their own identity and their own voter record. It means a by option mandate, but an option, or giving them the option to provide a social security number, so long as convinced and sure that that information is secured within the qualified system. Then I would be interested in offering that to people. I think anytime we can provide more layers of security, the better. So, but each individual does have a unique voter ID number. It's 9 digits long, and if you want to know what you can actually find it is, and that is unique to each registration that's processed. Any other questions? Those were all very good. Well, again, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. All of the presentations that were done today will be available on our website. They will be available on social media as well as our YouTube channel, and we are going to keep those up there indefinitely until we decide to take them down, but certainly to give everyone enough time to get all of the information they need. If there was a question that was not answered for you tonight, please, please do not hesitate to contact us. You can reach me directly here at the clerk's office. Any one of our staff members can help you as well. Any of those ways to contact us we talked about earlier at the beginning, please do so. Thank you so much, and everyone have a safe drive home. Thank you.